to be as diverse as possible. And you're from all over Europe, I believe. I think we've got quite good representation from across the continent. You can probably already tell I am not from Europe, but I try my best. And thanks very much, our host. And a quick introduction to the rest of the team. So we have the integration team, and we're from the AMC in Amsterdam. Even though I worked out, I can't actually pronounce the name correctly of it, the long version. So we have Mary Nicolau, and I am Jessie, so I've been on email to most of you, so nice to put faces to the email addresses. And then we have the MooDFOOD project management team. So we have Marilyn here, Ingeborg, and we have Mika making a mad dash from the airport. She's flown straight in from Sydney, so she may be a little bit jet lagged when she arrives. So just an overview of the next 2 days. This morning we're going to focus mainly on an introduction to the MooDFOOD project and then all the results from the project as a whole. So we have the MooDFOOD trial, our sustainability findings, and then the overview of the literature, so bringing that all together within the field. After that, we're going to start our group discussions, and we're going to have a lot of group discussions over the next 2 days. We'll split into 3 groups, different groups each time, so you get time with everyone. And then we'll look at the behavioural findings around food-related behaviour strategies for the prevention of depression. And in the afternoon, we're going to look at the current media landscape, so what's going on in the media around diet and depression, and again, having conversations after that. We will look at potential products we've been brainstorming and stakeholders to target with our dissemination plan. And then this evening, we have a lovely dinner plan. I probably can't pronounce the name, but this picture here is from our dinner location, so that's something to look forward to throughout the day. And I'll give you another reminder at lunchtime that we might be ending just before 5 and the bus leaves at 5. So at lunchtime when we go over to Hotel Palladium, might be worthwhile grabbing anything you'll need for the evening. Tomorrow we're going to do a quick summary of what we went over. Then we're going to look at the policy landscape and how our findings might apply to that and what we might do in the policy realm. And then we're going to look through, hopefully you all managed to complete the questionnaire link. So we're going to look through the current results from that questionnaire. So what do practitioners in the field tell us they want from the MooDFOOD project? And then we'll just have a quick summary of everything we've gone over, and hopefully we've scheduled in 3:30. Fingers crossed we might finish early tomorrow. Any questions about the agenda? We have a late lunch planned to be in the Spanish tempo there, so hopefully we can survive until 2 p.m. Yeah, there's food here. Well fed there. Okay, so just a quick overview. MooDFOOD's overall objectives. So the project aims to gain a better understanding of the psychological, lifestyle and environmental pathways underlying the multifaceted bi-directional links of food intake, nutrient status, food-related behaviour and obesity with depression, and to develop innovative, evidence-based, feasible, effective and sustainable nutritional strategies for the prevention of depression within Europe. I always like to simplify it to just our logo, which is preventing depression through food. So can you do it? What's the evidence there? So before I go into sort of the aims of today's meeting, I thought I'd get Marilyn up to talk a bit more about the project.
So when this whole project was initiated at the start, there were already some links known, potential links known, or claimed, maybe I should say, between mood and food. And these types of books and pills were already available on the market before we started. However, clearly, we did not know what the evidence behind these links were. And that was the reason why there was a FP7 call from the European Union. The call was posted early 2012, and Ingeborg and myself noticed it, and we thought this is something we might be able to do. So we come in contact with a lot of people in this room if they want to collaborate and form a consortium to focus on this topic. And the call actually has a special history because usually there's a lot of politics involved in setting up the program for the EU in funding new projects. This was actually sort of maybe the hobby of a project officer in Brussels. She considered this a very important topic, and she really, by herself, pushed this project, this topic on the agenda of FP7. And of course, many people applied grants, and we were the people with this excellent consortium that we had on board to win this bid and receive the money. So Ingeborg and myself traveled to Brussels and had a hard time to figure out where to go, what officer we need to talk to in the negotiations. It was a struggle for us because we were completely new to the funding scheme of the European Union. But I'm glad that we managed, and we have worked on a wonderful project in the past years. So we started on January 1st in 2014 with lots of money to work for 5 years on this topic. So we were really excited to be able to do this. Well, Jesse already showed you the main objectives. There's really a scientific objective of the project, which is the first objective. And well, diet is quite broad, and also in the call they had listed very specific topics they wanted to be addressed in the call, and we already knew that you really have to address them, all these topics. So all these factors were mentioned in the call and were nicely worked out in our research plan. So it's really the science part, how is food intake and nutrient status linked to depression, but we also felt that food-related behaviors and obesity were central in that question, so we added those as well. And then we have all these potential pathways, how food could be linked to depression and what factors might modify this type of association, so that's addressed as well in the project. The second objective is more working towards products that might benefit the EU citizen and might benefit health professionals in targeting diet in patients or non-patients. So this is really establishing effectiveness of intervention, feasibility of interventions, and ultimately to develop guidelines and tools, and that's the main reason why we're here today, to make a start with those guidelines and tools. So this is an important part of the project. So this is the conceptual model that's underlying the MooDFOOD project. So main focus on food intake and behavior in relationship to depression. Bi-directional, although for example the trial is focusing on this arrow only, but in our observational work, and I'll show you later on, we're looking at the other direction as well. And then trying to sort of explore some of the underlying mechanisms, which we did in the past years, but probably also continue to do in the next years when we have these rich data sets now of all the data we collected. And the project will end at the end of this year, but I think this rich data set will be used in the coming years by many of us and maybe others as well to further explore these associations. So these are all the partners. So we have a lot of scientific partners, academic centers, universities, and we have 3 dissemination partners who are in the room as well. We'll just go around the room, so you'll get to know these people. So a nice group of people all around Europe. And this is the structure of the project. So we have several work packages. We have observational research in this first part, and then we have some short-term and long-term experiment in this part, and then the integration phase where we're sort of currently at this stage. And this is all managed by the Free University, and we have, of course, a big group of dissemination partners to bring the scientific evidence to the public. So the observational work is really based around 5 cohort studies that are all partners of the project. However, we did do an additional project within Work Package 1, and 2 other cohort studies volunteered to deliver data and results to that project as well, and Mary will talk a bit about that. And all in all, we have now over 20 publications already from these different cohort studies, all focusing on obesity or diet in the link and food-related behavior in the link with depression. So it's been very successful, and I think many more papers will come out this year and next year, because a lot of the PhD students are finishing up their thesis about this time, so a lot will come out in the next month. We also try to establish a sort of young investigator network. The PhD students of the different cohorts and the different locations have been in close contact with each other and have their own separate meetings. And we really hope this will enable to continue the research on the topic of diet and nutrition in the coming years. So that's not ending at the end of this project, but maybe they can apply for grants and funding to further explore also the data of the MooDFOOD project. So work package 2 consists of 2 phases. One is 2 online surveys that we performed, and some data already have been published from these 2 online surveys conducted in Denmark and Spain, and I think that Lisa will talk a bit We'll talk a bit more. Yeah, there you are. You're behind the pillar for me. We'll talk more about that. And we used the money to get extra information on food behavior and diet in some of the MooDFOOD cohorts to enrich the data sets to be able to further explore the links with depression. And we did an experiment, a web-based experiment, trying to test the feasibility of changing these type of behaviors through a web-based intervention. And some of the results were presented by Lisa as well. So then there are 2 work packages working hard on a prevention trial. We call it a MooDFOOD depression prevention trial. We have 4 trial centers, and the center here, the University of Balearic, is one of the trial centers. And we also have Amsterdam, Exeter, and Leipzig involved. So it's a trial with a 2x2 factorial design, focusing on either a multi-nutrient supplement versus placebo, or a food-related behavior change in many therapy sessions versus no therapy sessions. And Mariska really worked hard on analyzing the data in the past weeks, spent long hours in doing that, and will present the results. So we're very excited that she's going to do that. If you want any specific details about this trial, you can look it up in the signed paper written by Nicola and the group. So integration, that's a very important component. Also considered very valuable according to the EU, so you really have to do a good job. And Amsterdam and the Medical Center and the Vrije University are involved in doing this, and this will be, of course, part of the program today. And then we have the 3 different dissemination partners: the European Association for the Study of Obesity, the European Alliance Against Depression, the Global Alliance Against Alliance Networks Europe. So they have already did a great job in disseminating the project. The project is out there, there's a website, and people can find information about the project. The first results already have been disseminated through these partners. And of course, the results that we produce today and the materials that will be produced later on will be disseminated by these groups, and hopefully other groups as well, but at least they will play an important role. And the whole project is managed by Vrije Universiteit, and Mika really is a very famous person within and we all rely on her. She will arrive later on, so I will introduce her as soon as she arrives. So you've all seen this paper, I think it was sent to you by email, so it gives you an overview of what we did in the past year. No results yet, but sort of the structure of the plan. And actually we spent the morning and part of the afternoon to present you first results of the different parts of the project. So that at least you know more or less what the important science messages are from the project that need to be translated, need to be compared with, of course, the science output that's out there in the literature from non-food, MooDFOOD projects, to be able to integrate all that information, translate it to different projects. So thank you for your attention. I'll give the word to you.
Yes.
Yeah? And if there are any specific questions, just ask any MooDFOOD partner here in the room, because we're all involved and we all know about the project.
All right, so thank you for that, Marilyn. Very comprehensive overview. I'm actually the newest to the team, so I probably know the least about the whole project. So yes, please ask the other team of food researchers. So as I said, there's been a lot of work over the last 4 years, and we're finally at this stage here where we have the results. We're looking to integrate those results and then head towards the dissemination, where we really have to bring them together and think, what can we communicate and who do we want to communicate that to? So planning the dissemination and communication strategy. We've decided to anchor this to the EU's framework for communicating European research and innovation. Here's a little, oops, there you go. This is what it looks like. It's actually been updated for Horizon 2020, just with a new cover page, same content inside. And we plan to publish this communication plan as a case study of following that strategy. And it will be informed by a full needs analysis. Just an overview of what's inside that strategy. They focus heavily on project management, which MooDFOOD was planned very well for. So the communication and dissemination part was planned for from the commencement. That's where we have our partners established. In the planning, engaging with collaborators and setting objectives and goals there. In the research integration and dissemination, bringing everything together and working out how that sits in the field of research and what's most important to communicate. And then of course implementation and evaluation. What have we done and what's been in the impact. The project will probably be finished, this is how many disseminated, that's our evaluation there. And in all EU research, it's important to emphasise the benefit of European collaboration and innovation in research. I quite liked this. It was a takeout, worked in nutrition communications and quite a few projects now. And I was a big fan that the EU specified that it should not be creative people coming up with cool ideas. And that was a common mistake. And I have been guilty of doing it in the past. And so this is why we're bringing everyone together and we're trying to get a lot of insights and opinions on what we should do there. So a better practice is setting targets, audiences and messages, clarifying them before we address the media, and we've been saving up all the results of MooDFOOD to do just that. Engaging creative people to plan and achieve the desired outcomes. You are now all the creative people today, and clearly defining our objectives. So our needs analysis. First we had our second integration meeting, and that's where we went over all of the results so far and what our final conclusions would be. We also have the questionnaires out for both the lay public and health professionals, as well as organisations to gather further afield insights. And we have today's and tomorrow's meeting there where we hope to gain your insights too. Through that, we will plan the dissemination strategy and the outputs. So the goals of this meeting. So the overall conference objective is to initiate the dissemination strategy. We want to work out how we will communicate the evidence base, as well as the nutritional strategies. So we've both got the evidence, and that's going to be intricate and it needs a lot of details. But then what will we say to the public? What should they do to prevent depression? And inform the development of a number of resources that then spread these messages. So what we need from you is participation. So it was good that you're all talking beforehand, because we need you to keep doing that throughout the meeting. We need your insights, suggestions, ideas, critical thinking, so you can question our conclusions, and if they're valid and if they should be spread, and conversation. We really want to get into the nitty-gritty of our messages. We also need your consent. You are now actually participants within the case study, so you'll see under the agenda is a consent form, and that just states, first states that you're willing to partake in our evaluation paper for the dissemination plan, and for all those contributions we will never name you specifically in the paper, but we may name you as, say, a dietitian said this, or a policy maker said this, but you won't be identifiable. Second of all, within that same form, before you sign it, is a confidentiality form. So we have worked quite hard to keep the overall results of MooDFOOD a secret, not a secret, but just holding them back until we can release them as a full package. We're hoping that will be around autumn this year. And so we're hoping, today we will be sharing all of our results with you. We're hoping you can hold off on sharing them until we come out with a full MooDFOOD package. So then the confidentiality, Stephen, in the consent forms there, just states that you won't be sharing the information until it's time to be shared widely. So I hope you don't mind us saying that.
Do we use two forms? Because I think we only have to go to the
It's combined. It's combined, yeah. I've given you a no get out clause, so you have to sign both.
Yeah.
see over the next couple of hours, we have a whole lot of findings, a whole lot of specific scientific details within them, and now the challenge is to simplify that to a level that is still evidence-based but very practical, and get it out to our stakeholders. So here's some very high stock images of our stakeholders, because that's what health professionals look like, and that's what policymakers look like, and the general public with no children apparently. So it is a careful balancing act, and I've been only recently moved to the Netherlands, and I've been blown away by the Dutch dietary guidelines, because previously I was working with the English dietary guidelines, and I apologise to all the English people as I start going through this. And it's just very interesting that technically they should come from the same evidence base, with only a few papers specific to the in-country differences. But they do have quite substantial differences within there. In the Netherlands, we have, a special, we've got eat 90 grams of whole grain products daily, which is very specific, and that's based on specific evidence that showed a health benefit for that level. Eat legumes weekly, eat at least 15 grams of unsalted nuts daily, and also drink 3 glasses of tea a day, which I thought was, even the British don't have that in their guidelines. Whereas in England we have the Eat Well Guide, and it all remains very broad. And we actually came up with a lot of difficulties with this in Public Health England. Because it was broad, then that restricted what patient resources we could come up with. Because if you even came up with a plate that said, fill half the plate with vegetables, they said, what's your evidence base for that? We have no evidence base for that. I said, it's probably the most safe message you could ever say in nutrition, but they said no, because the guidelines, we would have to do this funny-shaped vegetable thing on the plate, and it all gets very complicated. But it is quite amazing, the difference, despite similar evidence, with the messages that come up with there. And just to keep in mind, applying these guidelines to the real world, so currently in the UK, the recommendation around red meat is if you eat more than 90 grams of red or processed meat a day, it's recommended that you reduce your intake to 70 grams. Now who knows what 90 grams is and who knows what 70 grams is? And when you go to Sainsbury's, there is only one steak that's 100 grams. That was the smallest steak I could find. So it would be very difficult to reduce it to 70 grams. More likely they were around 170 grams steaks. And because they've combined red and processed meat there, the real message is we want to avoid processed meat altogether. But it kind of implies by accident that you can eat a whole pack of ham, because that's about 80 grams. So just keeping in mind those practicalities in the real world. Okay, so the meeting targets. We know when we will promote the results, so that'll be around autumn this year. Now we need to determine what to say, why we'll say it, why it's important, who to say it to, how to say it, and where to say it. So what channels and messages are we going to use? Finding the balance is very difficult. We need to at all times remain evidence-based, but keeping aware of that evidence is very hard to interpret for the general public, so the understanding needs to be there. We need to weigh up the potential harm, and that's becoming in the media a lot lately, that implying that you can prevent depression through diet implies that it's people's fault that they have depression because they had a poor diet, so weighing up that message. Misinterpretation, it's bound to happen, but how can we minimise the risk? Media cut-through, so we have to make sure we've got actually exciting messages that will get coverage. Practicality and helpfulness, and of course we want to have a good impact. But an impact on who is what we need to determine. So things to keep in mind as we go through it, both what we found and what we did not find. So I know we'll go over the results soon, and I'm sure then our conversations will stick to what we did find, but we need to remember what we did not find evidence for an impact with there. The place of MooDFOOD's investigations in the complete field of research into diet and depression. Keeping in mind who will be looking for this information. So we often talk a lot about, if you think we're aiming to prevent depression, not treat depression. So even a psychologist, it's almost, once they reach a psychologist, it's too late, we've missed our window there likely. So how do we best reach the people before they make it to the psychologist there? Who will benefit from this information? Who's going to be looking? It's likely people who already have depressive symptoms who will look for the information. How will the science be interpreted, misinterpreted by the media? what do we want to achieve, what are the risks, what are the benefits. Always keep in mind your area of expertise. You have quite a varied area of expertise, so please speak up if you think something doesn't align. And that the MooDFOOD project has a firm deadline, so when we're planning these dissemination strategies, we need to keep in mind that the funding ceases at the end of this year. So we can't really make long-term commitments to these communication strategies. You know, we can't be delivering lectures ongoing unless it's at the kindness of the researchers' hearts. So we have that firm deadline that we need to produce and release the results. And also, very importantly, the diversity of Europe. And so, you know, we're trying to lump them all together, but when it comes to food systems and diets, they're very, very diverse. It might be that we need to take a different approach to Mediterranean countries compared to other countries, and so we need to keep that in mind as we go. And this is a lovely slide showing the most horrible foods, the culinary horrors around Europe, where we've got some real delicacies.
Okay, well, thank you, Jessie, for meeting me and giving me the opportunity to present on behalf of the full trial team the results of the MooDFOOD depression prevention trial to all of you. It is very exciting for us. I will first give a brief background of the reason why we conducted this study, and then I will describe the methods and the results to you in a moment. As you probably know, depression is a very common disorder. About 5 to 6% has a depression in a year. And if you look at the lifetime prevalence, this number even increased rapidly. So 1 in about 5 persons will suffer from a depression in lifetime. It is a disorder that started often at an early age and is also associated with a very high disease burden. It's also illustrated by the WHO Global Burden of Disease Studies. And what we see is that depression is also a very chronic disorder. So persons have a depressive episode once, but are also at increased risk to have an episode later on or have a very chronic, long course episode. We know that persons with a depression also have a poorer lifestyle, being less physically active, smoking more often, but also adhere to a less healthy diet. And we also know from depression that it is linked to obesity and other somatic illnesses like diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So these are more common in persons who have depression. What about food and nutrition? These are modifiable targets that can potentially improve health. So these are very important for mental health disorders like depression. Last year, there were a couple of studies that showed that there are some. You're just in time for the results. So there were a couple of randomized controlled studies out last year that showed that several nutritional strategies, like adhering to the Mediterranean diet, are effective for the treatment of depression. However, it is not yet clear whether these nutritional strategies are also useful for the prevention of depression. And that is what we studied in the MooDFOOD depression prevention trial. Here we want to examine the feasibility and the effectiveness of 2 different nutritional strategies to prevent a new episode of major depressive disorder in high-risk overweight persons with symptoms of depression. And we focus on persons who are at high risk for depression, so given the relationship between obesity and depression, we focus on overweight persons and also persons who already had some level of depressive symptom, but not yet a full-blown major depressive disorder. Today I will mainly talk about the effectiveness, feasibility will also be studied. But I don't think that is presented today, right? No, not today. So today the effectiveness. This slide also has been shown. If you want to know more about the design of the study, you can read this, but I will try to summarize it for all of you that you don't need to go through this whole paper today. As already explained, we had 4 recruitment sites for this prevention study in 4 different countries. And we wanted to we designed our study as a 2x2 factorial design. And this figure illustrates a bit more like how does that look like. So we have 2 interventions that we want to study. One being the food-related behavioral change intervention. I will talk about a bit more in detail later on, what that means. And we also had multi-nutrient supplements. And people were randomly allocated to each of these combinations. So we had a couple of persons who received both the FBC, food-related behavioral change intervention, and multi-nutrient supplements. Some people who received either intervention, and some people who did not receive any intervention at all. We did a sample size calculation, and it appeared that we needed to include around 1,000 persons in each of these cells to be enough power to detect the difference that we thought we would find, and also taking into account the dropout that we had. And this 2x2 factorial design is really efficient because you can combine these interventions. So we have in total 500 persons receiving the food behavioral change intervention and 500 persons who did not receive that. And also with the nutrient supplements, by this design we were able to combine these, compare these groups together. So we have 500 persons who received these interventions and 500 persons who didn't receive this intervention. Okay, more about the multi-nutrient supplements. Persons were randomly allocated to supplements, and that were people had to take 2 pills a day. One of them were the omega-3 fatty acids, and that was provided in a jar with a blue label on it. And one was a mixture of other multi-nutrients, calcium, selenium, folic acid, and vitamin D. And it was provided in a jar with a green label attached to that. And these multi-nutrient supplements were selected because there was some evidence that these supplements could either help for the treatment of depression, or there was some evidence based on observational studies that persons with depression had actually lower values of these nutrients. And therefore we considered, okay, maybe if we supplement that to them, these levels go up and maybe improve symptoms. Yes?
Was this the patient, the subject, that got it in a blinded way or not?
Mm-hmm. So exactly. So that's there was also a condition that was the placebo condition, and persons received identical jars with identical labels, and also these were the pills. So the jelly ones are the omega-3 fatty acids, and the gray ones are the brownish ones were the other supplements, and these were exactly the same. So people did not know what. There was not a label attached. This is the active. No, it was not the case.
Maybe a second question, if I may. Was there any consideration for probiotics to be included in the experimental in the nutrients? You can
Consideration, yes, but
Didn't make it.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So participants and also the researchers and everybody was blinded to watch which type of pills persons received. And persons took these 2 pills for a duration of 12 months. The second nutritional intervention that we had was the food-related behavioral change intervention. And that is an intervention that contains a lot of components of the behavioral activation, which is also an evidence-based treatment for depression. But then we focus really on foods items. So we try to improve healthy habits, improve the dietary intake of persons, talks about how to prepare foods, how to do the food shopping, so buying healthy products instead of all kinds of snacks, and also have a healthy way of eating and a mindful way of eating your dinner or your food. And that was this intervention was provided at the same time as the multi-nutrient supplements. It was provided by trained psychologists. Fernandina was one of the persons who gave that training in the Netherlands. And the training consisted of 8 individual sessions. That was spread for a period of half a year. And the first sessions were planned a bit closer together, and later on the sessions were a bit more spread in time. And that's the second part of the half of the year were 6 group sessions that were done. And in total this intervention also lasted for 12 months. The kind of diet that we promoted during this food-related behavioral intervention was the Mediterranean dietary pattern. And briefly this intervention looked like this. So eating a lot of vegetables, eating a lot of fruits, a lot of fish, reduce the meat intake, eat pulses and choose whole grain products, low-fat dairy products, olive oil instead of butter, and limit the intake of processed food and soft drinks, and drink alcoholic beverages in moderation. So this was a diet that was promoted in the food behavioral change intervention. The persons there was also half of the group did not receive this intervention, so they only received the pills, either the supplements or the placebo. Okay, to randomize the persons into these interventions, we did a block randomization, and it was stratified according to research site and past diagnosis of major depression to take into account these factors. Persons were allocated the ratio to each of these 4 cells 1 to 1 to 1, so equal amount of participants in each cells. And of course, we try to blind this study as much as possible. For the participants, they could of course only be blinded to the pills. They of course knew whether they received the FBC intervention or not. But the study assistants who did the measurements were blinded to watch both interventions, and also the researchers were blinded to watch both interventions. So we did not know which variable was what in our analysis until I think last Friday, because that was the moment that we deblinded the study. So these results are really fresh from the press, and it's really exciting to interpret this further. Something about the inclusion and exclusion criteria of the study. I did not mention that earlier, but I think we included persons between 18 and 75 years old, persons who had to have overweight, so a BMI above 25, and they had to have symptoms of depression, and that it was measured with a PHQ-9, which is a questionnaire of 9 items, and persons need to have a score of 5 or greater to enter the study. Yes?
The score higher than 5. I mean, how many percent of the population, like here in the room, how many of us would have more than 5? How many?
I don't know how many exactly, but
in general, I mean, this is like 5%, 10%, 50%.
Well, I know from this instrument, the PHQ-9 score of 10, that is sometimes used to classify persons with a major depressive disorder or having at least moderate symptoms of depression. And this kind of represents kind of mild symptoms of depression.
It's a minority of the population.
Yeah, it's still it is the minority, but I think probably a couple of persons here will also have at least. Yeah, I mean, if assuming that we are a good representative of the normal population, then a couple will probably show higher than 5.
Thank you.
Okay. The main exclusion criteria for this study was having a current episode of depression, because that was our outcome. We wanted to see whether we could actually prevent the onset of depression, so persons needed to be free of it at the start of the study. They could also not have other psychiatric disorders, or if they were already taking any supplements, we asked them to either stop with it, or if they could not do that because it was, for instance, prescribed by a physician, they could also not take part in the study. Yes?
Did you exclude people with anxiety?
With anxiety,
Yeah.
persons, who had a diagnosis or treatment in the past 6 months were excluded. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And how were the participants recruited?
That differed per site. So we had 4 recruitment sites, and there were some sites who sent mailings to people in certain municipalities, so a very population-based way of recruiting persons, but also from the general practice persons were included. I think for Leipzig, maybe you can say something about it.
We basically did it by GP practices. They got flyers, so the patients sitting in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Advertisements. We used that from the university.
Actually, my question originated from the fact that it was psychologists giving the what you call the intervention, and not dietitians. I don't know if that's a common practice, but it struck out to me. Did you consider working with dietitians?
Yeah, we also had a discussion, okay, which person can best deliver this intervention. But it's kind of a mixture. It is also a lot of psychological elements are in the intervention. The behavioral activation, that is a kind of therapy that is offered by psychologists.
Okay.
So that's why we decided in the end to give this intervention by psychologists. They were of course first trained also to have a good understanding about nutrition, what is healthy.
Yeah.
And what we also had for each site is that we had a dietitian in place. So if there were any questions coming up during the intervention, we could all consult the dietitian with that.
Yeah. Because probably DFAT would say that dietitians are actually trained on behavior change.
Thank you.
We use advertisement in the community centers, GP centers, and indeed in the media on TV and radio here in Mallorca.
So the recruitment strategies were also very diverse.
So there's depression in Mallorca even? In Mallorca.
There was another question?
Just because I was not involved in the part, why you decided to keep only overweight and obese people in the study? Why was the reason to exclude the full range of BMI?
Why did we exclude the upper limits of BMI?
No, lower levels.
We wanted to deliver these interventions to persons who are at a high risk of developing depression. And I think based on the current evidence that we have, we know that persons who already have some depressive symptoms are of course on a higher risk, but also given the links between obesity or overweight and depression, we also included persons with at least overweight, who were at least overweight, because these are also at an increased risk of developing depression.
That actually triggers my question. How can you then exclude the impact of obesity? Because what you want to investigate is different.
Isn't it?
Well, I think we still have a quite a broad range of obesity. Because there are some people who are close to the 25, and there are peer group farther away from that. So I think within these limits, we are still able to study the impact of obesity.
I think indeed you will in the people who have, if you have, you'll see the results in the moment. So they're excited, but results that we'll see. And the more questions you ask, the longer we'll last before we get there. But what the results that we'll see in the moment will apply to people with these characteristics. That's all there is to it.
And there's also a very pragmatic reason because of our primary outcome. It's new development of clinical depression. So you need sufficient cases to develop. So you include a high-risk group to be able, within 1 year duration, you would have sufficient number of cases. So it's a very pragmatic approach. If you need that, if you want to that out.
And it's also, the other logic for it pragmatically is that if you're changing diet or nutrition, the assumption is that that's less likely to be already healthy in people who are obese than it is in people who are not necessarily obese. So you might have something to change.
Just looking at the slide, you first put the products in the supermarket, which says MooDFOOD. I would have thought these foods are putting across the population. That's what I thought. I may be wrong. So in that sense, I thought the study would be valuable for dietary guidelines looking at it across the population. So you'll have to do a stronger justification.
This is only
when
the
you-
trial.
Yeah.
Of course, the whole MooDFOOD project is more than just a trial. So for the trial, you have to make
Okay,
a
thank
choice.
you.
Yeah, to start somewhere.
Yeah, and,
Okay, let us
and
not
a lot
say
of other things we have been looking at in the observational stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And for prevention of depression, if you took a general sample population, you would need a sample in the tens of thousands to be able to detect any change or any effective intervention, just because of the prevalence base rate.
Yes? Okay, what are the outcomes that we were interested in? Well, a primary endpoint of this study was the 12-month onset of an episode of major depressive disorder, and it was based on the DSM-4 criteria, so the psychiatric diagnosis criteria. It was measured with a mini 5.0, so that is a mini international neuropsychiatric interview. And we measured this after 3 and 6 and 12 months in time. Sorry. We also formulated several secondary outcomes. Secondary outcomes were depressive symptoms measured with 2 different depressive questionnaires, anxiety symptoms, and quality of life instruments. And we also had other secondary outcomes focused on food intake, sustainability of food intake, which Alessandra will talk about later, I think immediately after this presentation, right? Yeah. And also on food-related, this is what was there. Food-related behavioral, physical activity, sedentary behavior, body weight, and body weight perception. Well, for today I will focus on the main mental health outcomes. So these are the major depressive disorder and this list of depressive anxiety symptoms and quality of life. And all these secondary endpoints were measured also, they were measured at baseline after 3, 6, and 12 months. Well, the MooDFOOD trial consists of a recruitment phase, and that started in July 2015. We recruited in slightly over a year. We recruited all the participants. They first had an online screening, and that was mainly to confirm the inclusion criteria. If persons fulfill these criteria and were still interested to participate, they could leave their contact details and were contacted again for a telephone screening. And in this telephone screening, we asked them about a lot of the exclusion criteria which we had. And in the end, people who were still wanted to participate and fulfilled all the inclusion and exclusion criteria were invited for the baseline interview. And after the baseline interview, they were immediately randomized to the conditions, interventional strategies that we had. And then we had, after 3, 6, and 12 months follow-up, we had the measurements that I showed on the previous slides. So these measurements paralleled the interventions. And we also included, and that I think was a suggestion of Simon last year in the Florence meeting, to include also look at more follow-up measurements. So what we did was that we also did a 24-month follow-up in measurements, and this was done online, and that is still ongoing. So we finished, up until this line, and we are halfway the 24 months follow-up at the moment. Now, a bit about the statistical analysis. I will not go in too many details, and if you are not interested in this, you can maybe skip this a bit. For the others who are interested, it's here on the slide. So our primary outcome was the cumulative onset of MDD in a period of 12 months. So the measured at 3, 6, and 12 months combined this, and that was the onset. We analyzed it with a logistic regression. Of course, there are persons who drop out in the study, so to account for that, we had missing data imputations. so that everybody who was randomized could also be analyzed in the analysis. And a secondary analysis that we did was a Cox regression, and that studies the time to onset to an event. So that way we could investigate whether the interventions were related to a quicker onset of MDD in our trial. For the secondary outcomes, we were interested in two things. We wanted to know what is the effect of the interventions at follow-up. And we did this with a linear generalized estimated equation, longitudinal analysis of covariance, very long name. But this way we could model the outcomes and taking it into account the baseline values. And we were also interested in the effect of the instruments after 1 year. And this was analyzed with a robust linear regression based on the multiply imputed data. Yes.
Did you decide up front from the primary that the logistic or the Cox regression was your primary?
This is the primary logistic.
Logistic. So Cox is actually a secondary.
Yeah, that is the secondary. The primary analysis for the primary outcome, but more secondary analysis.
Okay, but the primary is the logistic regression.
Yeah, this is the main analysis.
Okay.
Yeah. We modeled the interventions, the two interventions together, using effect coding, because that is a strategy that is commonly used in factorial designs, and you can estimate the effects of the interventions and also the interactions in one model together, and makes it easier to interpret the results. And all analysis we were just for cited history of depression. That was also described in our analysis plan, and the analysis were done in the statistical program of R. Okay, well now, these are, now finally we have the results. Okay, for the trial recruitment, we had almost 6,000 persons completing the initial online screening for the inclusion criteria. Of these, over 2,000 persons were eligible for the telephone interview. So of course, a lot of persons in the end did not want to participate or could not be reached. So we had over 17,000 persons who actually had this telephone interview, and we had over 1,250 persons meeting the inclusion criteria of the study. And this resulted in the end that 2,025 persons were randomized. Oh, sorry. Yeah. About yeah. This slide is a bit. The letters on the slide are a bit small, but this is illustrating the reasons why persons drop out during the screening phases. So I will highlight some of them. So, for instance, persons who filled out the online screening, about 600 of them used antidepressant medication, so they could not be part of it. Over 500 persons had a PHQ score that was lower than the cutoff that we presented, so could also not take part in the study. And after the telephone screening, we had almost 260 persons that already fulfilled the criteria of major depressive disorder, so could not participate in the trial for that reason. And well, there are a lot of other reasons listed here, but I think they are not really relevant at the moment yet. So I think this is also the slide that Marjolein showed, with the number of persons allocated to each of these interventions. Yeah, as you can see, the number of participants is equally distributed, and that makes sense because that was also the way people were randomized, because of the stratification. Yeah, so this is the number of persons. And these are the baseline characteristics of these participants. And what we see here is the first row are the persons who received none of the interventions. This row received the supplements. This row received the FBC only, and this column received the FBC and the supplements, so all interventions. And well, as you can see for the whole trial, the number of females is about 75%. So we have more females than males in the study. The average age was around 46.5. And the centers were also really balanced. That is also because of the stratification that we applied for randomization. About 1/3 of the persons had a history of depression. And if you look at the mean depression severity of persons who entered the study, it was not that high, it was around 7. Keeping in mind that the moderate depression severity cutoff is around 10, persons were somewhere between mild and slightly more depression symptoms when they enter the studies. And this is another measure, the IBS, that goes from 0 to 84, so 21 is also not a very high score on this. The mean BMI in the study was around 31.4. So we have both persons, so with overweight only, and also some persons who are also obese. Yeah. Well, our primary outcome was the onset of a major depressive disorder, and this figure is illustrating the onset of depression for the whole group. So what you see here is time. So we have the 3 months measurement, 6 month measurement, and 12 months measurements. In green, you can see the number of events that took place. So after 3 months, there were 47 persons developing a major depressive disorder. We had 784 persons who did not have a major depressive disorder, and we had also some missing. So about 194 persons did not participate in the first follow-up measurement. We see that this number for all the follow-up measurements is approximately the same. So every time some persons have depression, some not. And if you add all these different time points together, you come to a total of 105 persons in the whole trial out of the 1,025 participants that developed a major depressive disorder.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
These 105 are not all different persons. For instance, a person that has depression and the third one can also have it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is exactly the case. So it could be that here's a person who developed a depression and after 12 months again, and is for instance here in this list. So that is why it's that important to also have that cumulative measure. So the last bar who's really adding up all these different time points.
Because if you add up the 3, then it's 121.
Yeah, but that is because persons can have a depression at several time points. So that could be the same persons.
The 105 are different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this bar is the most important one. So this is really the accumulation. Yeah.
So the 47, 34, the number of episodes, or they also if a person had a continued passionate encounter twice, or if it's only if it's a new episode of depression.
Well, this is these are the persons who had at least one episode, and these are the ones who were free at all time points. That clear? Yeah.
Could one of the reasons for missing data be quite a severe episode and therefore not willing to get that?
Yeah, we asked the persons if they, of course, were invited for the next measurement, and if they did not want to take part, we asked them what are the reasons for that. And the most important reasons were often practical reasons, so I don't have time for it, or it's too burdensome. Yeah. But we also had some persons who dropped out for mental health reasons, but I don't think it's in the presentation today, but this reason was equally divided amongst all these groups. So there was not a clear indication that it was in one subgroup. And I think the number of persons that dropped out for mental health reasons was not that high. Yeah, it was about 15 or maybe 20.
I had 20.
Yeah, 20, I guess. Something like that in total. Yeah. that the onset of depression would be about 30% in the group that received the inactive component, so the placebo, for instance, and around 20% onset of depression in the persons who received the interventions. So what we can already show here is that the onset of depression is much lower than we anticipated, based on the power calculations that we had. So here I illustrate the onset of depression by each of the randomization groups. So here is a group that did not receive an intervention at all, and then we have an onset of around 10%. Here are the ones who only received supplements, then we have an onset of 30%. And here are the ones who received the FBC, then it's again 10%, and here again both intervention, and then it's 9%. So what you clear, and there are also a lot of missing data points at each intervention. So what you can see from these graphs is that the differences in onset of depression is not that big in these 4 interventions. We analyzed the data in a way that we could compare the FBC intervention compared to no FBC and supplement against the placebo conditions to make use of the largest sample size possible. Here you can see the number of events that took place in each of these groups. So that is not that different, and also accompanied with quite a number of missing findings. If we look at the results of the logistic regression analysis, we indeed find no significant effect of FBC or the supplements, and also no significant interaction between these two. So that means that the 2 nutritional strategies are not related to the onset of major depressive disorder in this study, which is quite disappointing. And I think the main reason that we don't find this is because in the study the number of persons who develop the events is much lower than we expected, and in the power calculation. This is showing the results of the Cox regression analysis. So we have the time to event analysis, so a kind of different way to look at the data. And again, this also illustrates that there is no effect of the FBC intervention and no effect of the supplements, and nor their combination. So that is not related to a quicker time to onset to the first depressive episode. Now, and move over to the results of the depressive symptoms. So what you can see here, and the results are a bit difficult to read because the scales are small when I put it on the PowerPoint presentation. But here we have the course of the depressive symptoms measured with a PHQ instrument over time. So here are the time points. This is baseline after 3 months, 6 months, and this is after 12 months. And here you can see this panel shows the differences between the ones who received the FBC intervention, and that is listed in blue, compared to the ones who received no FBC intervention, and that is listed in quite orange color. And what you see in this graph is that persons tend to go down for all interventions. So you see that depressive symptoms over time go down, which is of course also to be expected because we selected persons who scored about a certain cutoff, so you have regression to the mean, and also persons who wanted to do the study because they wanted to change something. So they are, you see this going down in all groups. And the differences are not that large between the groups. The same for the other depressive instrument, you see kind of the similar pattern for the FBC and no FBC. For the pills, the colors are now switched because the deblinded, when we deblinded, the coding had to be switched because the -1 was the placebo, sorry, the -1 was the effect, was the supplement, and the 1 was the placebo. So in this case, the orange bar represents the supplements and the blue bar represents the placebo. So what you see here is that, again, the depressive symptoms over time drop, but that, yeah, it appears to be a bit, this reduction appears to be a bit larger for the ones allocated to the placebo. And for the IDS, we see kind of a comparable pattern, but not so much difference as T12. Here are the results also for the other secondary mental health outcomes, so the anxiety and health utility, which is kind of capturing also quality of life. Again, the FBC, here we see some differences coming out. So the ones who received the FBC had slightly lower depressive anxiety symptoms over time compared to the condition that received no FBC. And for the pills, this pattern was a bit more mixed, but again, the placebo was appeared to be doing slightly better compared to the supplement condition. And overall, the quality of life went up a bit in the study, which is also to be expected if the depressive and anxiety symptoms drop. Yes?
Okay, statistics is a while for me that I use statistics, but do the power calculation have a parameter or take into account the fact that within a study population you have likely less events as in this case, if you see? Do you understand my question?
So the sample size calculation was based on the primary outcome, so not on the symptom scales, because if you have enough power to detect a difference on a binary outcome, you probably be enough power when you have multiple measures of continuous scales. What we for the sample size calculation, we looked at other prevention studies, because there is also a meta-analysis out that is looking at all kinds of preventive efforts for the prevention of depression, and these estimates were also used to...
okay, so the answer is yes.
Yeah, so we took into account, but there is, within these studies, there is some variation on what is considered a high-risk population. Sometimes they say persons need to have more depressive symptoms, sometimes they need to have a previous episode one. So it is
quite difficult.
Yeah, it is quite difficult. Across the studies they can differ. Yeah, so I think these figures are really important also to illustrate and understand the statistics that we have for these findings. So on this slide I show you the statistics for the secondary outcomes. I highlighted in yellow the ones that were statistically significant. And the first start with PHQ, then IDS, then anxiety, and then utility, health related quality of life measures. And what we see is that I did a recoding last night, so we see that the supplements compared to the placebo is related to kind of relatively higher depressive symptoms over time compared to placebo. So that is also what we see here. So that the supplements are higher compared to placebos over the course of follow-up. So that is also confirmed by the statistical analysis that we did. And also after T12, we find a significant difference. Again, that the persons who receive supplements are worse off than the ones who receive placebo, which is quite surprising, but that is just what the data shows. And overall, the effects are not that huge. So we did not find an effect of the FBC for PHQ, and also the interaction, so the combination of the two interventions was also not significant, meaning that it was not that there was no synergistic effect for the intervention. Well, for the IDS, we find for the pills an overall effect again, that the supplements group is worse off over time compared to placebo, so they have a higher follow-up values compared to the placebo groups. So that corresponds with the other depressive measure. And again, we find no effect for FVC, but also not on at T12 time points, and also not on their interventions. For anxiety, we find that the ones who received the FVC intervention had better outcomes on anxiety symptoms after 12 months. So they improved more compared to the ones who did not receive FVC. For the pills, we did not find an effect at that time point, but we found an effect of the overall follow-up effect, so of the supplements. And I think this is illustrated by here that we find the difference was present at earlier stages, but not at the T12 measurements. And for utility or quality of life, we did not find a significant effect of either interventions.
Yeah. So any multiple testing correction on these p-values or not?
No, we did not do that.
Yeah, okay, so that of course puts these p-values in a...
Yeah, I think that is also important.
You have to multiply them by 10 or 20 if you want to meaningfully interpret them, right?
Yeah, well, we...
Some are quite low,
Yeah, we did not do that because these were formulated as secondary outcomes from the beginning of the study. But yeah, it's a bit mixed.
It's informed, it's explorative.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it is important consideration that we look at quite some things. Yeah. Okay. Question is there?
I'll leave it there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So is this slide clear to everyone? Because it's a full table of results. We also did some other explorative analysis, and what we found for some outcomes was whether when persons had a higher severity of symptoms at the start of the intervention, the effect of FVC was stronger when the severity was higher. So I think this is also a very important information, and we will dive into that a bit more, because that can also help us to explain the findings and also help us to see whether this intervention probably has more potential in persons who really have severe problems at the beginning.
And Monica, the pill effect that you described, was that in the right direction or the supplement direction?
This was effect, so it was stronger, and then it was, so it was the supplement effect, what is it? No, the placebo effect was stronger.
So in the same direction but more pronounced.
So the interactions were both in the same direction, but stronger for people with more severe baselines.
But then for the placebo, Well, to summarize all of these findings, what we showed was that there is no effect of nutritional strategies or their combination on the onset of depression, and this is also has mainly to do, I think, that we had much less cases than we expected. If we look at the placebos, we found, that these were related to a reduction in overall depressive and anxiety symptom measures, and also a depressive symptoms measures with one of the depression instruments at T12 compared to supplements. And this is of course a bit counterintuitive because if we would expect anything, we would have expected the supplements being more effective. But in this case, it's the other way around. And we also find a significant effect of the FVC on anxiety symptoms compared to no FVC, only FVC12 follow-up. So these are really interesting results, and I think we just blinded the results, so there is now a lot of things that need to be done. We can now also dive into the adherence analysis. So, for instance, we can now see how many sessions were actually attended of these FEC interventions and see whether the persons who attended more sessions had possibly more benefit of the intervention. We will also have blood data available, and so we can see whether the nutrients that were provided in the pills also change in follow-up. So we can also look into that if you indeed see the changes that we expect. So so I think a lot of things need to be done still. So, but I'm really curious to your input, and I would like to thank you all for your attention, and also I'd like to thank all collaborators. Yeah, I'm not sure. Now or
yes, so I guess now we're going to just have questions about the trial from Russia, and then we're going to have more evidence portrayed before we get into the real discussions about what we say as a result of MooDFOOD as a whole. I guess at the end of it, you're talking about the extra analysis for the adherence, and what was really interesting about the insights into the pill adherence was that it was most of the people that were taking the REV supplements believed they were taking the placebos. So it kind of gave us an early indication of the supplements may not be working if they're taking these pills and they think they're on the placebos. So that was interesting to me. But yeah, it's just questions for Marissa about that.
Yeah. Maybe we go back to your conclusion slide.
Yeah. Okay. Question.
So I'm not surprised at all because I've been very similar experiences, and I think there can be maybe 4 options. One is it's true, there's no effect, and what you found. One is that is probably some effect that you can't find it because maybe it's very small and you're not powered, as you said. It can be maybe because the intervention was not of the right intensity or length, or it's not measured. It's there, but the measures are not measuring it properly.
Yeah.
However, I've had very similar experience with an exercise study that I was running, and I wonder whether you measured the behaviors of the both control and the intervention in terms of nutrition and behavioral change. Because what happened in our study when we looked at the end, so it was just an intervention of exercise. The controls carried out more exercise than the intervention, right? We kind of foresaw that, so we measured it throughout the study. Because from the moment that you give out an information sheet, and people that come into the trial, they come because they think it may be helpful, and you cannot stop them from changing their diet or their behaviors. So if that's somehow measured, I don't know whether that's been captured, that maybe
I saw that I was going to show something.
Yeah, I'll show changes in dietary intake.
in
but
both
really
groups.
in the therapy and the non-therapy.
So nutrient level.
Not the
No, we
nutrient.
don't have it yet. Not yet, we will have it.
Yeah.
We have blood on baseline and 6 and 5.
But I fully agree that is really important information to understand what is going on. I mean, if we already see changes, if we don't see a change in behavioral, then it's you're less reason to expect also change in your depression or health outcomes, or at least you know that it's not by that pathway and maybe something else of the intervention. Just being part of the study is already enough to let that improve depressive symptoms, for instance. Yeah.
I wonder what effect would have the behavioral change that would be related to diet and food would be given by dietitians.
Yeah,
as a dietitian.
Yeah.
Maybe you should comment on that after you see it.
Okay.
And I have 2 suggestions, actually, or suggestion. First, I would not stress too much this the lack of the power, because if you had an effect, if you saw a proper odds ratio with a 2 wide confidence interval, then I would say, see, there's a proper effect size, but there's not enough accuracy, so not enough power. But now your effect size is already close to 1. So I wouldn't talk too much about not enough power, because that doesn't seem to be the primary problem. Secondly, what I would find very interesting, but maybe we get more data on that later, if in the supplement group, I mean, there was, what was it saying, vitamin D, omega-3, what was it in the end?
Yeah, we'll look at
So,
slides.
so these were the you select nutrients that might possibly impact depression, So it will be, of course, be very interesting also to, if you can, either on blood samples, or I don't know if you have any insight in the actual diet intake, if you can somewhat estimate their intake or status for these nutrients, then you have a beautiful, apart from the when you could make it into a cohort study at the same time, where you relate the baseline or implant during the intervention of these nutrients to the incidence of depression. And then it will be interesting to see if people who are high or low in these nutrients have a higher or lower incidence of depression. That would be That would be very interesting. I think.
Yeah, I think that is indeed one of the plans that we have with the data, and I think also when you look at the supplement treatment studies, there are not many studies that select persons based on efficiencies in nutrients. So they try to give them to all, but maybe the ones who are most efficient will benefit from this cocktail of
so the effect of these will anyway depend hugely on your baseline status.
Yeah, that is what I would expect, but that's we don't have that data yet, so that's.
And finally, for your conclusion slide, I would also suggest be quite careful with the conclusion based on the secondary outcome. Because as I said before, you have like 24 comparisons you made, you have some p-values, so that these are there's too much chance that they are chance findings. So be quite careful with your wording when you say had significant effect on well. Most curious, any will say, well, no, you didn't show significant effect. You have an exploratory outcome which may generate a hypothesis, but I wouldn't word it this strongly.
I would agree with you probably for the third bullet. The second bullet, I think the p-values were rather low and consisted on 3 outcomes in the same direction.
That's more consistent.
So I think there's more consistency there, but I would frame the conclusion probably the other way around. Like at least stating that the nutrients did not have a beneficial effect on.
Instead
of focusing on the placebo effect. Because that was also our hypothesis, so we should frame it according to our hypothesis.
Robust about
Right.
didn't do it.
And I think that's a more robust conclusion, and it's a more safe
It's useful to point that out. That's what I'm saying to say.
You didn't go out there to demonstrate the effect of the placebo.
I think that also.
And then you get maybe the discussion whether it's even harmful, but that's a second discussion. I think, but that's they're not beneficial. I think should be the main conclusion.
That's a good point, because I already made this text and slide before the deep blinding was there. So although we had the other way around, but I simply replaced the words with it. But for I think the paper we need to frame it different and
also
go
for our
the
message to that world.
Exactly. Good point.
Yes, Marissa, do you have post-test data on BMI or on weight or both?
You are the second one who's asking me that today. But we have the data, but we haven't analyzed it yet.
That'd be interesting.
Because I would, I was talking to Ed also earlier, and we would expect at least the FBC to result also in some weight loss, although that was not the aim of the intervention.
If it changes diet.
If it changes diet, you would expect also some differences in weight. For the supplements, we have less clear evidence, although it could of course be that people would feel better because of the supplements and therefore improve lifestyle and therefore improve weight. But that's a very good suggestion. We need to dive into that.
Well, Mariska, don't get frustrated. Mariska worked really long days in the past weeks to get all these analyses done. And we are only asking her for more analysis. Don't get frustrated. And I think another round for applause for Mariska.
Thank you everyone for having me here today. I will be presenting the sustainability results and also dietary intake. So but before I do, I want to first just give you a background of sustainability and diets. Okay, so human health and ecosystem health are strongly interrelated. As humans, we are really dependent on the ecosystem for provisions such as food, water, fuel, fiber, and also for services such as climate regulation. and us humans both directly and indirectly influence ecosystem health, indirectly through globalization, population growth, and directly through deforestation, through pollution, those big things that you might be seeing in the news recently. So these are big topics in the news with the melting of the glaciers, deforestation of the Amazon, the plastic soup in the ocean, pesticide use with monocultures. Now, these are all big problems that will affect and are affecting our health, and believe it or not, one big factor that influences these events are food, or is food in our diet. And in particular, the different food types and quantities of foods. And to show you why the mixture of foods in our dietary patterns are very important to the environment is because each food is associated with a different impact on the environment. And when we talk about environmental sustainability, we have to choose certain indicators to measure it. So to give you an example with greenhouse gas emissions, now these are, greenhouse gases are gases that influence global warming. And you might not be able to read all of this, but this just shows you different food products and how their greenhouse gas emissions compare to the comparing carbon footprint, and shown by car miles driven per 4 ounces, which is about 100 grams of each food product consumed. So the green, this is the lowest impact, and these are made up of vegetables, legumes. There's also milk in there, some yogurt. Going into yellow, it's more vegetables, potatoes, grains, orange, eggs, fish, and then red is mostly animal-based foods. And you can see the worst choice here is lamb. I don't know if anyone wants the lamb chop, but for 100 grams, it's about 7 car miles driven. So diets that have a lot of animal-based products overall have a greater impact compared to diets that are made up of different vegetables, fruits, non-plant or animal-based products. So keeping this in mind, when we are talking about MooDFOOD, we're looking at different diet is evolved. And both Kristen and Marla presented this earlier, but so the trial has 2 different nutritional strategies. And for the sustainability of the trial, we really focused on the food-related behavioral change therapy because it focused on dietary change and really focusing on different food products to create a healthier diet. So in this analysis, we don't look at the supplements or the placebo, but we really focus on those who received the therapy and those who didn't receive the therapy. And Mariska beautifully describes the intervention. So again, we're looking really at the impact of this advice on dietary intake and the sustainability of the diet. And we would assume, because it does emphasize fruits, vegetables, and to reduce meat, that maybe it would have a positive impact on sustainability. So our research question is, what is the effect of the FBC therapy on dietary intake and the sustainability of the diet? So there are 2 outcomes. The first outcome was dietary intake by food groups, and we really looked at just intake by grams per day, and we looked at sustainability. But as I mentioned before, sustainability can be many things, so we had to narrow it down to some indicators. And the indicators we chose were greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and fossil energy use. And these are 3 main indicators that are used in looking at the environmental impact of diets. We also included a weighted score. So this is maybe a technical or more complicated equation, but it just shows that the different weights. So fossil energy use has the smallest weight for all of these indicators. And so I will be presenting the results for all three plus the weighted score. So the measurements. To measure dietary intake, food frequency questionnaire was used. And it was measured the intake of 211 food items at baseline at 6 months and 12 months. And this is an example of the food frequency questionnaire, so how it was asked. So it solely measured frequency of intake, so not portion size. So what we had to do is with this frequency for each food item, we paired it with standard serving sizes and also with a nutrient estimate database to calculate daily intake and also energy. And we also divided all the foods into 20 food groups based on similar nutrients. Now, the measurements of the environmental indicators. So all three indicators, greenhouse gas emissions, fossil energy use, and land use, were estimated from cradle to grave. So that means really looking at the entire life cycle of the food product, from the inputs to grow the foods, the livestock, the feeds, the land use, the water, processing, distribution, consumption, and to waste. So all of these are aggregated to come up with the final impact for each food item. And estimates were based on an average European diet, which is, so we use the same estimates for every country. And we received these as estimates from Block Consultants. So those are a consultancy group based in the Netherlands. And we were able to uniquely match 132 food items with the indicators. And for the remaining, because we had a total of 211 food items, we had to make the best estimate based on how the food is grown and produced. So this just gives you, here are some of the food groups that we looked at. And these are the environmental impacts per 100 gram of food. So the blue bar is the greenhouse gas emissions, red is land use, and green is fossil energy use. So this is not a weighted scale right now, but so just adding all these up, you see that fish actually remains high because of the fossil energy use of fish is very high. Red and processed meat has the greatest greenhouse gas emission impact, where olive oil has the greatest land use impact. But when we look at the weighted scores, it shifts a bit. So red and processed meat has the overall largest impact, followed by olive oil, fish, poultry, and so forth. And just to keep it in mind, this is per 100 grams of food. So whenever looking at any similar data, this is really important because you wouldn't really eat 100 grams of olive oil in one go. So you might say, oh, olive oil is very, very bad, but this is for 100 grams of food. So statistical analysis, we used a similar method as Mariska. We did longitudinal analysis of covariance, but we used mixed models. And our independent variable was therapy or no therapy. And our dependent variable, so I will be presenting the changes in intake for 11 of the food groups. And also the effects on the greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and the fossil energy use, and the weighted score. And for all the effects, we adjusted for baseline value of the outcomes, the total energy intake, site, age, and sex. So the results. Baseline characteristics, so I'm just showing you the two groups. And I don't have all of the baseline characteristics here, but you can see, well, first off, we had to exclude some of the participants, those who didn't include or didn't fill in a baseline FFQ, those were excluded. And also those who had an implausible energy intake were excluded. The rest stayed in here. And you can see that they have comparable sustainability of the diet at baseline, and also for energy intake, they were pretty much, they are comparable. So now I'll just show you the changes in intake by these food groups here from the MooDFOOD dietary guidelines, and also the effects. So the changes are just crude changes and patterns, and the effects adjusted for baseline site energy intake, age, and sex. So just to show you changes in energy intake. So this shows you T0 is baseline, T6 is after 6 months, and T12 is at the end of the trial. The dotted line is the control, so no therapy, and the red line is the therapy. So you can see throughout the trial, both groups decrease their energy intake.
And can I just check, so energy intake is calculated across the whole FFQ, is that how it is?
Yes. Yeah. So now looking at vegetables. So the guideline for vegetables was to eat 300 to 400 grams of vegetables per day. So that is shown here by this red horizontal bar here. You can see already they were in the range for both groups. And the red group, so the therapy group, did increase their intake and actually went above the recommendations. The therapy effect was 14.1, and that was significant. And also, so just to show you how it varied by country, so there were some differences by country. Again, the dotted line was control, and the solid line is the therapy. But you see overall general similar pattern, except for, well, the Netherlands, the therapy decreased a bit after from 6 months to 12 months. But I'm not going to show you it by country for each one, but there are some differences by country.
Okay, that's useful to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fruits, similar. So the guideline was to eat 2 to 3 pieces of fruit per day, and we saw that already both of them were above the upper bound of the recommendation, just from this food frequency questionnaire. So, and you see that the therapy increased compared to the control, and the therapy effect was 18.7, also significant. And the last one by country. So you do, again, just see some changes, or some different patterns. Fish. So fish, it was recommended to eat 3 times fish per week. And this is frequency per week. And you can see that the therapy group had a large increase compared to the control group, and the therapy effect was highly significant at 7.2. Yeah.
Average frequencies. So
these are average frequencies.
People eat a lot of, surprisingly, a lot of fish already.
Yeah, surprisingly.
But we don't know about the portion sizes.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. So this is just frequency, not portion sizes here at all.
This doesn't break down like kind of fish, does it? So
No, this is
So
all.
this does not.
no, so I mean, fish and chips versus real mackerel.
Yeah. This is the tuna salad mixed with all the.
That's all fish.
Meat. So meat, it was recommended to reduce meat intake to 300 grams per week. Again, so this is in grams per week, and you see a decrease in both groups, but very high above the recommended intake. And there was a small therapy effect of -3, but it was not significant. Yes?
So was this self-reported? I missed that.
This is, yes, self-reported in the FFQ.
Is it, in the diary, how was this? Or during the interviews, how did you collect this information?
So, the FFQ was delivered by online, through an online questionnaire.
Food frequencies.
Yeah, yeah. Good question. But when we look, so when you dig deeper into the MooDFOOD dietary guidelines, it really focused on reducing red meat and maybe replacing it with poultry or as a healthier meat. So we separated red meat and poultry, and we saw actually a significant effect for red meat. So the therapy effect was negative 4.2. In poultry, we saw an increase, but not significant.
This is all meat together, your curve.
This is all meat
All
together.
including the poultry.
Yeah, including the poultry. Legumes and pulses, the recommendation was to eat pulses or legumes 3 times per week. And we saw that the therapy group increased, or had a greater increase in the control group, and the therapy effect was 3.1, and that was significant. Whole grains, the recommendation was to choose whole grains, so this is a little more vague than the other ones. So here this shows you the whole grains in percent, so all whole grains above, compared to all grains. And so we saw that the percentage of whole grains in their diets increased compared to the control group, and the therapy effect was 12.2 and significant. Low-fat dairy, the guideline was to use 3 servings of low-fat dairy per day, and you see they were pretty low above the recommended intake, and they remained pretty low. So we didn't see actually any effect here for low-fat dairy.
But that doesn't say anything about the high fat.
No. So I'm just looking right now at the guidelines. I did look at high fat, and there was also no change in high fat. Olive oil, similar to whole grains, the recommendation was to use olive oil as a principal cooking source. So, I mean, a little bit more concrete, but still vague. And so again, here this is the percentage of olive oil compared to all oils, fats, and dressings. And we see that the therapy group increased compared to the control group, and the therapy effect was 0.8 and significant. Processed food, I believe this is, second to last recommendation, so limit intake of processed foods and soft drinks. So this is just processed foods, and we see that the therapy group decreased more than the control group, and the therapy effect was negative 8.7. And for soft drinks, we saw the therapy group also decrease compared to the control group. The therapy effect was negative 9.6, but this was not significant. So now looking at the environmental sustainability of the diet. Before I go on, yes, questions?
Just one question. When you checked the intake of fruits and vegetables, did you look at the seasonal effects? For example, if I'm told in summertime to eat vegetable, I'm happy, that in winter time vegetables are not that good. So I don't know if the seasonal effects were.
Yeah, currently that's not taken into account in this. It could be because
it could not be.
It could not be.
No, because it's a whole year intervention and it's
randomized.
So
No, but I mean everywhere it was at the same time, right? So the beginning and the end of the 6 months.
But it's randomized over the group, so it can never be that can never be the effect.
Okay, but the start of the trial was around the same time everywhere.
No.
People were recruited over a 14-month period, so people were recruited and then
Okay,
followed.
The start was so much wide that.
So assuming we recruited at the same rate across those 12 months, then there might be a seasonal effect.
Between the groups.
Yeah.
Between the groups.
Yeah.
Is it possible that there is a seasonal effect because recruitment did go, it wasn't continuous, right? It was continuous recruitment, but the number
If there was suddenly more people recruited at one time of year than another, and we'd have to go back and check that. My impression is that there wasn't.
No, and then it's still randomized over the group.
And T0 is the same season as T12 for everyone.
For everyone.
Yeah.
Should you look at the socioeconomic status? I mean, this is very expensive diet, you know, if you're going to buy olive oil and fish and I wonder whether.
No, I haven't. But that would be interesting to look into, especially to see how that would influence this.
Randomized. That's also randomized.
Yeah. Also randomized,
Yes.
just to see.
So if we focus on the therapy effect all these issues are not important. Of course, in the translation it might be important to the public, but looking at the effect it's not important.
You've mentioned these, there's nearly all the food groups that we focused on in the intervention. There's one extra one, which was reducing alcohol to moderate.
Oh, sorry, this is the next one. I was getting ahead of myself because I like your sustainability results, but yeah. Good call. So alcohol. So the guideline for alcohol was to drink alcoholic beverages in moderation. So what we saw was that the frequency of alcohol per day decreased in the therapy group. And the effects was negative 2.1, not significant.
2.1, how can it be 2.1?
These are not adjusted, these are just accrued changes. And frequency, it's not, this isn't measured in grams per day. And this is,
Grams, that's grams.
yeah, so this is showing,
It's not 2 drinks per day,
No.
it's 2 grams of alcohol.
yeah, 2 milliliters.
Because on your y-axis you have the number of drinks.
Yeah.
What you've got there is you've got a big standard error, haven't you?
Yeah.
Some people change it.
Every time when she showed the graphs, it was in frequencies, and the effect, therapy effect is calculated back to grams per day, assuming a normal portion size.
So 2.1
Grams.
grams of
Oh.
ethanol,
No,
Alcohol.
so that translates to how many drinks?
no, nothing.
No.
That's very confusing. Less than this.
And even self-reported data for alcohol,
Yeah.
we probably should at least pay attention to this slide. Of all other slides,
So now looking at the sustainability. So similarly, this is showing this recipe score, and this is also the effect on the recipe score. We see that both groups decrease in this score, so that means they reduce their impact on greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and fossil energy use with this weighted score throughout the trial. But compared to the control group, there was no effect of the therapy on sustainability. Now looking more at the individual indicators, the greenhouse gas emissions, similarly, we see reductions in both groups, and there was no therapy effect. For land use, we see reductions in land use for both groups and no therapy effect. However, for fossil energy use, we see that the therapy group had an increase in fossil energy use compared to the control group. And this was significant, but with 1 millijoule per day. But to describe, I'll show you some more data to show you why we see no effect for greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and why we would see an effect for this. Yes?
So if I understand from the previous slides, this might be the result of eating the fish.
That's
Okay.
yeah. So you already answered this question. No, wait. I'll just show you the data for this. So this is just a summary slide of all the effects. So these are the effects adjusted for what I mentioned: baseline, site, age, sex. This is not, so these asterisks and these p sizes are not taking into account the multiple tests. But if you do, then we would really focus on this p-value, so the 3 stars, where whole grains and processed foods would remain statistically significant.
And fish.
And fish, yes, sorry. And then again, so the effect on therapy on sustainability, there was no effect for the P-recipe score. Greenhouse gas emissions or land use, but there was a significant effect on fossil energy use.
So,
Yep.
can you go back to the previous?
Yeah.
So everything above the x-axis means it increases.
Yeah. But yeah, this is grams per day.
So,
Decrease due to the therapy, no?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's therapy.
relative to the
Relative to
control.
the control, yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, these are increase and then okay, the elk and elk red meat. So so in terms of your the sustainable side, everything on the right is good. If you like.
Yeah, this is all very.
This was helpful in terms of sustainability. Everything above the x-axis was not good.
No, this is just the consumption.
This is just the
You're looking
grams
at
per day.
consumption, grams.
Yeah.
So
Ah,
this
this is
shows,
the change. Okay, this
Yeah.
is this is just looking at changes,
Yeah.
not yet related to the
Yeah.
score.
Not yet.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so it shows that the advice that we gave to people to eat more was actually successful, and also
So-
the advice that we gave
Okay.
products to people to eat less.
Okay, and then we'll look into the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this,
yes.
Very quick question, sorry if I missed it, but how did you define the processed foods?
Processed foods included. Let me go back to this. Included processed meat as well, and it included chips. Any food in the food frequency questionnaire that was somehow processed that we identified in a group. So I can't.
Milk, bread.
No.
Wine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Beer.
No, it's like industrially processed, like we would call ultra processed food.
Okay.
Probably that.
Yeah, ultra processed.
Well, I think this is important. We don't have to detail now, but I agree it's an important question
Yeah.
because I think this is used and misused a
Yeah.
lot and
Yeah.
a lot of confusion around what it
Yeah.
is.
Right.
So if you come up to conclusions about processed food, I think it's important to be very clear.
Yeah.
What is it and what is it not?
Right. Okay. Good question.
Thank you. Congratulations. Really good putting the sustainability and nutrition into the same database and analysis. So, and I think from WHO's perspective, the environmental sustainability aspect is coming more and more closer to health policy now.
Yeah.
Now I think there's a big resolution going forward to recognize air pollution as one of the risk factors with the four main we have at the moment. So diet, physical activity, smoking, alcohol, and to link air pollution with as one of the risk factors. So we are looking at what's the evidence-based and policy framework to address this. Now, I was really keen to see your composite score, the weighted score, but I think realistically, it's really nice for researchers, but for policies, we will stick around greenhouse gas emission because most of the legal frameworks are around greenhouse gas emission.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm interested from your study, the greenhouse gas emission.
Well, yeah, we have, that's why we have them separately.
Yeah. So just a question actually, I have about the data sources. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Just one question, this fossil energy use, is it an output of the same life cycle analysis model along with the greenhouse gas emission?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were all collected the same way, so the same boundaries, the
Same boundaries.
categorization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned this is for an average European diet. Does that mean we assume that they were produced in Europe?
Yes.
Like the
Well, no. It's really just the average where it comes from as well.
So they look at where the data source comes,
Yes.
the food comes from, according to food balance sheet?
So exactly how they calculate it, I'm not sure where the food.
Yeah. So that means if 40% of your land is imported from New Zealand, that would have been factored in?
Yeah.
So that's very important for us because at the moment, greenhouse gas emission values, there's huge uncertainty, like 20 times uncertainty per portion. And that's why they have not been able to bring it to the table and come to any agreement because people don't agree on the numbers.
Yeah.
So if you can get from your consultants exact like boundaries and how they balance this origin of the food to the diet, which has been very difficult to do so far.
Yeah.
This is what I have seen before. You might have a very useful evidence because from French and UK studies in the past, they were not being able to adjust that.
Right.
They just estimated one figure from one study for the food, like beef or meat, and allocate that. That doesn't mean it is representative of what the people eat. But if you have done that, that's really novel for us.
Well, yeah, that's one big limitation for just looking into environmental sustainability of foods is because, all foods, it depends on how it's produced, and by country it varies, and also taking estimates from different papers, people have different assumptions. So making comparisons is very hard in general. But we used one group who conducted all the they kept it very consistent, and using it,
I just, a lot of people think if you go to one consultant, that means results are consistent. The data we have reviewed doesn't really prove that. Okay?
No, yeah.
So on the other hand, for the scientific robustness, that's not probably a good line to put. What you need to show is that they follow the correct method for each food group. But this is very useful for us. I really look forward to hearing more about how you estimated it and got it. Because as you mentioned, we tried to put this agenda forward, and people showed us in the UK, when people ate lamb produced in the UK, they were emitting more greenhouse gas emission than the lamb imported from New Zealand because of changes in production systems, right?
Right.
And the green beans in the UK were air freighted. They had more emissions than some of the meats because air freight added, production was 1 kilo, air freight added 10 kilos of carbon dioxide, right? So it's a really difficult landmine when we move with evidence. So we really need good clarity on this. Then we can push the agenda. They are all on the same page.
That is a problem, of course, with these data anyway. That the quality of the data that is going around is still limited, and it's getting better. And well, we work together with a group which is looking into getting as good quality data as possible. But there is a lot of variation around the estimates. We know that, and that is something you cannot rule out, of course. But that's difficult. We have to work with.
Yeah, it's just by defining what's the boundaries are, as you mentioned. And also I would request you to look at the literature numbers. So for each of your 20 food groups, look at what's the other published studies have reported as the minimum and maximum value. Like let's say for beef, what's the minimum and maximum other studies have reported. And if you can add a column for your studies with what's out there in the literature, it helps us to see where the bar is.
Yeah, that's a good. That would be good to include.
Thank you.
Can you just very short and simple explain me the p-value, what it exactly means? P-value, so what it is. So a high and a low p-value, what does it mean?
So a higher p-value is, so in statistical terms, is more chance that this value is within, is correctly estimated. So higher p-value is more lower p-value. Higher, more stars. So now looking at greenhouse gas emissions per food group. So this is different. This is not grams per day for each food group, but this is actually the greenhouse gas emissions per day for each of these food groups. And you see, it's related to intake. So already we may understand that if we increase intake of fish, the greenhouse gas emissions of fish are going to increase. The greenhouse gas emissions of red meat highly decrease. So we see a pretty good pattern here, but of course each food has some sort of impact. So increasing anything will increase at least slightly your environmental impact for that food.
So you combine the grams with the score per gram, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is related to the intake.
Grams times the impact per gram. Okay. Very good.
So red meat decreases because people reduce their intake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is all directly related to intake. But you'll see different magnitudes of change because each food has a different magnitude or is associated with a different impact. So for land use, you see red meat intake increase land use the most, or has the biggest impact on land use. Where we saw olive oil had a big highest impact on land use based on per 100 grams, but we see it increase, but not as much as red meat. Now fossil energy use. So increasing fish highly increased fossil energy use, whereas now the red meats, even though the intake decreased, it didn't have such a decrease in fossil energy use.
So why is there such a high fossil energy use for fish? Is that because of boats going out to fish?
Not only that, but also for aquaculture, so like the feed, to produce the feed, it requires a lot of yeah, and the transportation. It's a mixture of everything, but feed has a big.
For Europe, it's actually the fish you caught in Europe. You send it to China for packaging and send it back to Europe.
That's also one thing. Yeah.
And that's that probably happens with the feed as well.
Yeah.
The feed's produced somewhere, made somewhere else, and then sent to the fish farms. Yeah.
Okay, and to show you something slightly different, so what this shows you, this is intake of food groups in grams per day. Now these are, I think again, most of the food groups. And the first bar is baseline diet. So this is baseline intake of all the food groups. And this is for the therapy group, their intake of all the food groups after the therapy. So you see actually total intake by food group, it slightly decreases, and you can't really tell the difference by each food group. You see just slight changes.
But the total population.
This is
1,000.
no, this is actually just looking at those with therapy, because we wanted to see if everyone adhered to the guidelines, actually what would have happened. So if everyone adhered to the guidelines, this is how their grams per day would look. Again, you don't see a huge difference in total intake, but what you see here is this bar has the biggest change, and that is red meat. So if everyone followed our guidelines of eating 300 grams of meat, so meat and poultry. So, but red meat was highly discouraged. So if everyone followed the recommendations, it would look more like this. So how would that translate to sustainability? So now we're just looking at the weighted score. This was their baseline diet, and this is the sustainability score for each of the food groups. And after the trial, you see, well, the red meat slightly decreased. Fish, where's fish? This one, it slightly increases. But if they followed the dietary guidelines and completely adhered to it, actually you would see a larger decrease in sustainability, yes?
So the optimize is what's recommended.
This is, yeah, only on what's recommended.
And you then go one slide back, because I think the soft drink in the recommended is quite big.
Yeah, so this was to reduce soft drinks, and this is just based on their current values, and this is optimized based on all intake of these foods. So
to have realistic goals.
Yeah, this is more for realistic.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And it's relative. So you actually do see it. I think it's the same because they already had a relatively low intake of soft drinks.
Okay.
So you don't see really any change. You see a decrease at T12, which is for health and good, but just adhering to guidelines compared to baseline, they didn't really need to change because it was already pretty low. So also to adhere, so nuts was, the olive oil would increase. But overall, the P recipe score would decrease if everyone adhered to the dietary guidelines.
And that's driven mostly by the meat.
And it's, mostly by the meat. Yes?
The low-fat dietary and the high-fat is coming from the same cow in the end. So what's the difference of sustainability between cow and there needs to be milk to produce them?
Yeah, so it's the process of also producing it. So for low fat, maybe there are more processes for taking out the fat or diluting it, but then also, where is this? Well,
then low fat is better in terms of for environmental purposes.
Well, when you look at the averages, they're more or less similar, but let's.
The process is the same.
the low fat might be better for the health purpose.
Yeah, I got that one, but
But
there it looks like.
in percentage, it doesn't matter,
It doesn't
because
matter.
you still need to get rid of the fat.
You produce 1 liter of milk
Yeah.
to have either
Yeah.
whole fat milk or skim
You
milk.
still need the cow.
Yeah,
Cow.
that doesn't matter much.
But doesn't is there a cost associated with the low fat, and having to deal with the fat that's left over, processing the fat that's going from the crop?
Yeah, also.
So it's balances out the fact that it's still one cow, but the cost of
It's an extra
the
process.
product is an
Yeah.
extra process.
In the scale of things, I don't know how much.
That's not much.
So would sausages go under red meat? Sausages, where would they go in this category? Sausages.
Where are sausages in your?
Sausage
Would be, red meat is red meat, processed meat.
Because sometimes people say if we don't eat it, it's high impact for the environment, then we don't eat it, we produce it from the food waste. So like your fish, sometimes sausages are the example people put up in meetings. Yes, it's bad for health, but it's good for the environment because it's processed from the products that otherwise we won't eat. So it's good for health, right? So.
Well, yeah, so this is, I mean, these are really focusing on these indicators.
Yeah.
So there's so many indicators for sustainability.
That's true.
And also not just environment, but there's cultural, pleasure. So this is really just focusing on these indicators.
But the process meat is in the red meat.
It is in the red, yeah. Yes. So just to give you some, my thoughts with the synergies and trade-offs between health and sustainability. So the MooDFOOD Dietary Guidelines are plan-setter, which is good for, well, health and sustainability, promotes whole foods, discourages red meat and processed foods. Something else additional to the MooDFOOD Dietary Guidelines, there were also behavior guidelines, which were paired with this. And it had some sort of, I mean, it was not named slow food, but it had some sort of component to teach people to try to really enjoy and, well, eat mindfully, and which is a good component for sustainability as well, not just environmental, but the culture, the pleasurability, which also has an impact for sustainability. Also, there was some advice for planning meals, shopping, expanding cooking skills, which in the literature says, well, that might be good to prevent food waste. But we didn't look at that, but these are just some other thoughts behind just the entire MooDFOOD intervention. Now, the big trade-off here is fish. So one indicator that we don't have is overfishing, and biodiversity, which, I mean, then maybe our score would even shift more into a negative direction. So it would be good to maybe have a discussion about how much fish is good enough for health, because our recommendation was 3 times fish a day, which is pretty high. And recently, in the Netherlands, we had 2 times fish per week, but they recently reduced it to 1 because of sustainability reasons. But so I think for our discussion, it would be good to really think what is good enough for health.
So rather than how much fish, maybe you should try to get from your consultants about the farm fish versus sea fish. Because I mean, sea fish is like hunting, right? We can't go on hunting, so I don't think fishing from the sea would be sustainable anyway. But we should look at how we can provide the fish for the population. So if we can get some greenhouse gas estimates, farm salmon versus others, and farm fish, whether that would be a way forward. That would be very helpful for us in terms of our policy.
I'm not too optimistic about the farmed fish. to be
Okay,
honest.
I don't know, but just looking at how we can provide fish.
I think if our society would be less technophobe and insectophobe, we would have a huge development in using insects for fish feed, which is very, very efficient and also very much more sustainable than what happened. Now we're feeding fish to fish, which is very, it's very inefficient. But if we develop the possibilities for growing insects to feed to the fish, and then we eat the fish, we have a huge step forward.
Or GMO plants that
Yeah, yes, and that's another.
That's
So
another
I think there's very good ways to overcome the overfishing. I agree, the hunting is, I think those days should be more or less gone because we can't afford it.
Yeah, there's a lot to gain in the fishing industry, in fish farming, and they work on it, I know, but it's we're not there yet.
Yeah. And I mean, that is one solution to this problem, is changing, well, the system, making it more efficient to provide us the food, but what is needed is also dietary change to really accelerate our reduction in our impact on the environment. So it's really important to keep in mind as we will be maybe promoting a certain dietary pattern. So to keep it in mind for the next few days.
And also how that what we promote fits with what is locally in the country recommended. Because in the Netherlands it's 1 time per week, and I think in Spain it's 4, or at least 4. And so there's a big difference already from country to country within Europe.
We will.
We have to deal with that as well.
We will have more time to discuss all the recommendations, including that. I think we're heading towards a break time.
Yeah, and then maybe let me say this, because this is just highlighting, general sustainability dietary guidelines from other countries and some general ones. But I would say that for later. So, well, thank you for your attention.